Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and today we'll be going through the CN rerun analysis, this time featuring Blade. This rerun analysis, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit late. In hindsight, I think it all worked out pretty well for us, seeing how Blade has been performing exceptionally well in pure fiction, so I can bring you guys some relevant information that I might not be able to include it if I were to do his rerun analysis earlier. Without further ado, let's just get into today's content. This is going to be applicable for all players, including those that just started the game or those that are looking to get more with his Eidolons or signature Lightcone. This is not going to be a guide. We're not going to be recommending any builds, any team comps, any playstyles. For that, kindly refer to the unit analysis. And lastly, we are going to be focusing on the end game value, right? The value will be determined on how easy it is for Blade to help players clear our current end game content, namely Memory of Chaos 12 as well as pure fiction. So jumping straight into his overview, Blade is our only HP scaling crit DPS. Aside from the tankiness, which is one of the main benefits of being a HP scaling DPS, he is also extremely stamina efficient. I believe that I've mentioned this point multiple times throughout the past couple of months, where Blade allows players to run a HP percentage main stat with crit start stats, right? Every single one of our crit DPS so far wants to run attack percentage main stats. So considering that Blade is the only one that can make use of this gear, relics that players might otherwise have thrown away or not used can then be instead given to Blade. Since we are going to be farming for Hackerspace / Longiverse domain, especially if you want to farm for better support pieces, it is just a matter of time before you eventually get some really good Blade pieces, right? In a Longiverse Disciple especially, which makes him one of, if not the easiest DPS units to build. Another key note for Blade is that he has the lowest skill point consumption out of any DPS we have so far, which is 0.25 skill points per turn, or 1 skill point every 4 turns. This means you can easily fit Blade into most team comps, even dual DPS team comps as seen from Jingliu / Blade, on top of the addition of Ruanmei, which further boosts dual DPS team comps viability. But that being said, low skill point consumption, there is a negative connotation, which is the lower your skill point input, the lower your damage output. Because in honkaistarrail, I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, for every single skill point you give to a unit, the higher the unit's damage output is gonna be, with the exception of Jingliu, right? For almost pretty much every single one of our carries, the more frequently they can cast their skill points, then the more damage they're gonna be able to dish out. As you can see from most DPS units, we spend 1 skill point, we do a bunch of damage. Whether for in Bibliolune, if we were to spend 3 skill points instantly, it will deal a lot more damage, which is also why in Bibliolune is just able to deal damage so fast and so frequently, right? So for Blade, even though his skill point consumption is low, which some might think is a pretty good thing, the downside is that because of this low skill point consumption, his damage output is generally slower unless he gets hit very often, or we run him with Bronya, which brings us to the next point to his overview, which is that he has very limited supports that truly pair well with Blade. There really is only Bronya or Ruanmei, and Blade without Bronya suffers massively from a damage drop-off. Even if you have Ruanmei, Blade without Bronya is just such a world of difference, mainly because Bronya enables Blade to essentially double the pace of which Blade can use his skill points, right? Because you can cast his enhanced base attack a lot more frequently with Bronya. This makes Blade the biggest benefit of Bronya by far compared to any of our other DPS. And while Ruanmei definitely enables Blade to become viable even if you don't have Bronya, but Bronya is just so important for Blade. As you can see from this chart over here, she straight up increased Blade's damage output by literally 300%. Triples Blade's damage output. Are really powerful. So if players do not have Bronya, then it will definitely impact Blade's performance. But of course, that being said, Jingliu, Blade, Ruanmei is still a really good team comp, although for this team comp you would need 3 limited 5-star units, so something to consider. Now moving on to Blade's endgame viability, in Memory of Chaos, he is still our strongest Wind DPS unit, right? Because we really only have Wind Dunheng, Sampo, and the future Black Swan, and that is unlikely going to be changing anytime soon in the near future. But like I mentioned earlier just now, his damage output is comparatively slower than other DPS units like Jingliu, Imbuable Lune, Sile, Argenti due to his lower skill point consumption. Still, he can comfortably clear the endgame content as long as we provide him with the right support, so players don't have to worry about that too much. Then when it comes to pure fiction, Blade has been exceptionally strong with his 5 target follow-up attack abilities. He also pairs really well with Jingliu, Ruanmei, Pella, Bronya, so his performance in pure fiction is really good, much better than Memory of Chaos. The main thing is because he can easily get 5 stacks from his HP counter from the high number of mobs as well as DOT triggers, right? Out of all our destruction unit, Blade has the comfiest, right, the most comfortable clear out of all of them. So although he definitely still needs Bronya and Ruanmei to see his full potential, regardless if it was Memory of Chaos or pure fiction. So my bottom line is that Blade can definitely clear out current endgame content, but it is just that for Memory of Chaos, he is relatively slower. Then moving on to his Eidolons and Lightcones. For his Eidolons, really none of his Eidolons are super impactful. You can see that all of the Eidolons are pretty much moderate damage increase. His E1 increases his damage output by 10%, mainly because it has no further impact on his follow-up attack as well as his enhanced basic attack. His E2 is pretty much essentially a permanent 30 crit value because of the 15% crit chance, but it is not really that important because of Longiver's Disciple's 4-piece 16% crit rate as well as his signature light cone, which gives another 16% crit rate, right? So Blade essentially can get crit rate very frequently. So if his E2 was instead crit damage, like 30% crit damage, then maybe we'll see a slightly higher value here, but generally it's not super important as well. His E4 basically increases his HP for more damage scaling and durability, but at this point, if players are going for his E4, then you are probably going for his E6, which is an absolute game changer. E6 Blade, it is one of the strongest limited E6 units that we have right now compared to all of our previous limited units such as Sile, Jingyuan, and that's pretty much it, right? Yeah, but Blade's E6 is really strong. In fact, it is so strong that he can literally solo both pure fiction and Memory of Chaos if you have an E6 Blade, provided that you do stack on effect rest to prevent him from getting crowd control, right? So that's how powerful E6 Blade is. Then moving on to his light cone, should players get the unreachable sight. Unfortunately, compared to all of our rerun analysis like Sile and Silver Wolf, for Blade, his light cone really has no close substitute. So if players really want to get the best value out of Blade, then do consider getting his light cone. Well, mainly due to all these factors, right? Number one, it is the only HP percentage scaling light cone. Number 2, it has 32 crit value from the 16% crit rate, and number 3, it also easily procs the damage percentage that other destruction units might not be able to proc very easily. Also, Blade's signature light cone also just so happens to be Clara's best in slot light cone, so if any of you guys are Clara mains, then you might want to consider Blade's light cone as well. But that being said, between Blade's Eidolon 1, signature light cone, as well as Ruanmei takes the highest order of priority. There is no questions asked. You definitely should get Ruanmei instead of his signature light cone or his Eidolon 1, followed by his signature light cone, right? So his E1 has the lowest priority, Ruanmei has the highest priority because it ultimately just boils on the opportunity cost at the end of the day. Second last point is overall future outlook. Now, in the CN community, they believe that Blade's value shines the most in the early game, where relics are really hard to get by, and if players somehow manage to get either Bronya or Ruanmei, right? Asta, Tingyun, they don't really synergize that well with Blade. Pella is pretty decent, but nowhere near as impactful as Bronya or Ruanmei. So he will eventually face competition in the form of a Wind DPS, either gonna be a Wind Erudition, Wind Hunt, or a Wind Agility class unit in the future. Does Black Swan compete with Blade? We'll have to wait when Black Swan is actually released, right? So for now, no further comments. Due to Blade's naturally slower damage output, because like I mentioned, he spends his skill points slower, Blade's potential for the future content with higher health pool remains uncertain. CN community is quite skeptical if Blade is really the best bang for buck if players want to pull for a DPS unit, as compared to DPS units like Inhibitor, Lunei, and Jingliu, right? So at the end of the day, it's always going to be about opportunity cost. That said, he does have excellent value for low spenders and free-to-plays, or generally just players that just start out playing the game, because at the end of the day, it is really difficult to get good relics in Honkai Star Rail, especially for crit damage DPS. You only limit it to attack percentage scaling, which is every other DPS we have, right? So Blade offers this whole new window of opportunity where you can now make use of this HP crit scaling DPS gears. So really important. So in summary, a Blade can definitely clear the endgame content, but his potential really only shines with powerful supports like Bronya and Ruanmei. Due to poor timing with a powerhouse unit like Ruanmei herself, since they are both coming, then players should definitely adjust their pools accordingly. For the better comparison between Ruanmei, Dr. Ratio, and Kafka, Ruanmei, it is the highest priority between all 4 of these units, right? It's super important. In fact, Ruanmei just so happens to be the highest selling unit in CN so far, even beating out Silly, which is absolutely insane. Dr. Ratio, he's essentially free, so don't have to worry about it that much, but his Lightcone is extremely powerful on him, right? I will be talking about Dr. Ratio's Lightcone in the near future, but just know that Dr. Ratio, without his Lightcone, his performance may see a pretty big dip. I'm just gonna leave it as that first, right? Then lastly, for Kafka, if players want to play some DOT team comps, then Kafka is non-negotiable. You really want Kafka if you guys are gonna be playing DOT, especially if you're gonna be pulling for Black Swan, right? So that is basically it. And at this point, I just want to say, before I wrap everything up and before all the Blade mains come and burn my house down, in the CM player's perspective, and frankly this is aligning with my own perspective as well, any unit's pool value, it ultimately hinges on opportunity cost. If there is another DPS unit that can perform exceptionally well, they will inevitably provide a lot of values, especially for players that are not spending money on Honkai Star Rail, because pools are limited in a gacha game, right? So in that regard, if we are gonna be looking from like a DPS perspective, the main role of a DPS perspective is to deal as much damage as possible, just like how the main role of a support is to provide as much utility as possible, or like a role of a sustain, which is to make sure that your team survives, right? So strictly from a DPS standpoint, Blade is kind of like in the middle of both surviving content as well as dealing damage. So in that regard, because Blade is kind of like mixing both damage output and durability, his damage output inevitably falls a little bit short because it is now compensated by the durability. And in current content in Honkai Star Rail, there just really isn't a need so far where we need to run like a 10k DPS because we are running a team of 4, we are running sustain units, and generally the enemies are not hitting us to the point where they might one-shot our entire team at any given point of time, right? So because of this, even for normal DPS units that are not HP scaling, right, we can run Silly, we can run Jingliu, Inhibitor, they are not, say, to a point where they are super squishy, where they die from a single touch. And Blade is currently just offering a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. Our DPS units right now, they don't face the issue where they are dying left, right, and center without the durability, right? If, let's say, our DPS face a tremendous survivability issue, then Blade will definitely be able to solve this because he is, after all, our tankiest DPS unit. But unfortunately, based on the content in Star Rail right now, even in pure fiction, which is supposed to be a very fast-paced, high-stress environment where we might not even run supports, Blade's durability is just not facing a lot of value as compared to just providing players the arsenal to deal as much damage as humanly possible for a DPS unit, right? So that is why, generally speaking, Blade isn't so favored so far. But of course, if a player's objective is not to get the best DPS unit, is not to get a DPS that deals the highest amount of damage possible, and they simply want to clear content. If your objective is to clear content, then Blade definitely fills this role very nicely. It's not like his damage output is so low to the point where we literally can't even clear Memory of Chaos 12, or we literally can't even clear Pure Fiction. Even without Bronya, Blade can generally still do those things, although it is with much higher difficulty, right? So when it comes to absolutely clearing, as well as it becomes very easy to gear, then Blade can definitely fill this role, right? So I just want to make that absolutely clear to my viewers watching this video right now. And with that, we have come to the end of Blade's CN rerun analysis. I hope you guys enjoy my new camera, because I know for a fact I'm enjoying it so much right now. And as well as the new lighting. I'm still getting another light, but that's gonna come in the future, right? So if you guys want to engage in further discussions, feel free to hop on my Discord at Pokke's Village, where we have a very active community talking about honkaistarrail on a daily basis. If you guys want to check out my stream, that's gonna be at twitch.tv/MrPokke, where I'll be streaming 2 to 3 times. Schedule will be updated on Discord as well. With that, we've come to the end of today's content. All the best for your Ruanmei or Blade pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit. I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys. Did I say how I genuinely cannot believe this shit? I genuinely cannot believe this shit, guys.